That day at the United States Senate, a tense hearing unfolded under the high ceilings and heavy silence of the Judiciary Committee chamber. Senator Adam Schiff, known for his sharp rhetoric, suddenly hurled a scathing insult across the aisle, bluntly calling Senator John Kennedy a thug. The word struck like a slap, and for a moment, the room froze in collective disbelief. But within seconds, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Kennedy remained composed, his eyes steady and his expression unreadable. Then, with calm precision, he delivered a response that not only flipped the moment on its head, but left even his harshest critics in stunned silence. His words, sharp yet measured, surged through the chamber and beyond, spreading across the internet and cable news like wildfire. The hearing had begun like any other. Routine questions, the usual posturing, but what followed was a reckoning. Kennedy asked Schiff about his involvement in the Russian election interference investigation, a question that seemed standard until Schiff leaned in with ice in his voice and disdain in his tone. He told Kennedy that he didn't deserve to be there, accused him of putting on a circus, and ended by calling him a thug in a suit. Gasps echoed. Aides went still. Cameras zoomed. And then Kennedy responded, with a slight smirk. He leaned forward and in his warm Louisiana drawl, cut back with lethal grace. He said that in Louisiana, being called a thug by a man chasing Russian ghosts while his constituents slept under bridges was no insult. His voice grew firmer as he called out Schiff's hypocrisy. Decades in Congress while California drowned in homelessness, preaching democracy on television while veterans in his state went hungry. The room was transfixed as Kennedy continued, lowering his voice but not its weight, calling out Schiff's failure to respond to his own constituents' cries for help. He placed a file on the table and slowly opened it, exposing ignored reports from Oakland asking for federal aid. Schiff, visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat. Kennedy did not relent. He reminded the room of Schiff's repeated public declarations that he had proof of collusion between Trump and Russia, despite internal reports suggesting otherwise. A young woman in the audience, who had once begged Schiff's office for assistance, gripped the armrest as Kennedy's words landed with devastating accuracy, holding up a worn letter from a mother in Oakland that had gone unanswered. Kennedy stared directly at Schiff and asked what kind of leader abandons his own people. Schiff attempted to speak, but was stopped. The chairman allowed Kennedy to continue. One by one, Kennedy laid out the evidence, housing reports, funding redirections, public pleas ignored. He exposed how federal relief for small businesses had been rerouted after a call from Schiff's office. In the audience, a man who had written dozens of letters to Schiff wept quietly. Kennedy spoke not with fury, but with a sorrowful conviction of someone burdened by truth. He said this was not personal. It was about real pain, the pain of mothers in Oakland, of children growing up in hopelessness, of veterans sleeping in the streets. He showed a letter from an 11-year-old girl who described her grandmother living in a roach-infested apartment with no hot water, asking for help twice and receiving no reply. When Kennedy read her words aloud, the chamber fell into an aching silence. Schiff tried once more to retake the narrative, calling the moment political theater. But Kennedy had anticipated this and held up a photo of Schiff speaking at a reform event in San Francisco, pointing out that in the same year, over 60% of Oakland's affordable housing funds had been funneled to out-of-state investors. Behind him, a screen illuminated with emails, reports, and data connecting Schiff to this pattern of neglect. A young aide dropped a file and fled the room. Kennedy's voice softened, but his resolve remained steel. He said this was not revenge. This was accountability. He asked the chair to enter and to record the public reports showing hundreds of ignored calls and letters sent to Schiff's office. The chair agreed, and as the screen displayed evidence of community calls diverted to an unchecked voicemail, the weight of failure settled on Schiff's shoulders. He sat slumped, his eyes vacant, the mask of certainty shattered. Kennedy turned to the chamber and said, if this is what representation looks like, then something is deeply broken. Our people deserve better, our country deserves better. And then without warning, Kennedy turned his gaze directly toward Schiff and said that he held no grudge because this moment was not about personal grievances. It was about truth, and the truth begins when the lies leave the words echoed through the room, followed by soft applause and quiet sobs. A subtle but powerful shift had occurred, not born of hatred, but rooted deeply in truth. As Kennedy repeated the line again with calm strength, the chamber felt it resonate. This was not theater. It was transformation outside the hearing room, In a modest community center in Oakland, veterans and homeless residents gathered around an old television rigged to a tablet when Kennedy reread young Sarah's letter. A 78-year-old woman named Clara broke down in tears, whispering that the little girl lived just a few doors away in her neighborhood. Another man rose to his feet, his voice cracked with emotion as he declared that Schiff had abandoned him long ago. The video spread across the places most in need of hope and accountability. Kennedy's words did not echo with politics. They carried the weight of real pain back inside the hearing room. Schiff sat silently, his expression distant, his thoughts visibly spiraling, trying to hold steady in the face of a tidal wave of exposed reality. Aides leaned in nervously, legal advisors stiffened, and the Democratic senator seated behind Schiff grew eerily, still no longer posturing or whispering as Kennedy pressed forward, his voice unwavering, deep with conviction. He said this wasn't just about partisanship. This was about generations of pain finally being heard. He stood up, slowly adjusted his jacket, and placed one firm hand on the table, as if anchoring himself to something larger than politics. He reminded them all that he was not a man of elite pedigree, not raised in privilege, but shaped by poverty and perseverance in Louisiana, where families fought for every meal. He said that when Schiff called him a thug, he knew exactly what it meant, not just a slur, but a dismissal of the voices of the poor, the forgotten, the working class. It wasn't Kennedy he was condemning. It was a mother who prayed he would one day sit in that very chamber. A young senator who had once scoffed at Kennedy now bowed his head, a female colleague. "Clench your pen until it snapped in half," and Kennedy continued, saying he stood there not because of power, not because of corruption, but because he never gave up even when the world told him he didn't belong. And in that moment, the audience fell into stunned silence, many with eyes brimming with tears. "So no, Senator Schiff," Kennedy said, "I am not a thug. I am the voice of every soul you've overlooked and forgotten." Schiff slowly reached for the microphone, his hand shaking the composure he carried earlier, now faded. But before he could speak, Kennedy raised his hand, not with aggression, but with precision, and asked just one question. When was the last time you walked through the streets of Oakland without a camera behind you? When was the last time you sat beside a homeless person without clutching a speech? The question struck with the cold clarity of truth. Schiff faltered, unable to reply. Kennedy gently placed a photo before him, an image taken at the memorial of a teenager named Jamal who had been gunned down in Oakland. Schiff had once stood there promising reform, change, safety, but nothing changed. And Kennedy spoke softly, saying, "You forgot him." But his mother, she never forgot you. The chamber fell completely silent, and for the first time Schiff looked not powerful, but ashamed, utterly and unmistakably ashamed. Pause in the hallway. The crowd overflowed with reporters, aides, and a stunned audience. Did Kennedy just dismantle Schiff's entire career? Without even raising his voice, a Senate staffer whispered. An NBC reporter stood frozen, replaying the clip on their phone. Even political opponents were moved, not by scandal, but by truth. In a nearby break room, two former Schiff aides sat quietly, their eyes red. One, a young man named Marcus, finally spoke. "Everything Kennedy said, we saw it. I used to believe in him." The other replied softly, "Until we were told not to answer letters from the slums because they didn't matter." Back in the chamber, Kennedy sat alone at his table, leafing through letters from Oakland and San Francisco. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of those pains. The break ended and Schiff re-entered slowly, his eyes downcast. The chair granted Kennedy the final word. "I know some today thought this would be routine politics. Just another debate. It's not." Kennedy turned to Schiff, his voice soft. "This is a reckoning." He held up the final document. "This report shows over $3 million in housing repair funds for Oakland and San Francisco went missing while those homes were overrun with mold, leaks, and unsafe conditions." He didn't shout, but his words struck like blows to the heart. "This information came from a whistleblower, someone who once believed in you." A man in the audience gasped. "A contractor who tried to fix those homes but was pushed aside." Schiff began to tremble. He stood, his voice faltering. "This is a personal attack. This is an attempt to smear a senator serving his country." Kennedy shook his head lightly. "No, sir. This isn't about attacking you. This is about restoring dignity to the people you promised to protect." Kennedy stepped closer, not with anger, but with composure. "Power, not reputation, has made you indifferent. Power without humility destroys everything it touches." A few senators bowed their heads. If this hearing were just political theater, sir, I wouldn't be standing here. But it's not. It's the truth. And the truth doesn't care about titles. Schiff blinked, his eyes welling with tears, but he quickly turned away, unwilling to let anyone see that rare moment of vulnerability. Kennedy gently placed a letter from a girl named Sarah next to Schiff's microphone, his voice low but firm. You never answered her. Perhaps now you'll have to listen. The room sank into a profound, heavy silence so thick that each breath seemed to echo like a painful sigh. Outside, across the nation, the hearts of ordinary people were breaking. Not for fallen individual, but because someone had finally dared to stand up and speak for forgotten and abandoned. Kennedy slowly scanned the room, his gaze touching each person as if to convey the deepest message. I didn't come here for revenge. I didn't come to smear anyone. I came here for the people who place their trust in you. They deserve answers. He turned to the audience, his voice suddenly soft and full of emotion. Today in this room, there is a woman named Mrs. Ellen Carter. She's 68 years old. Her roof collapsed last winter during prolonged freeze and bone-chilling winds. The camera panned to an elderly woman in the third row, quietly wiping tears from her wrinkled cheeks, her face a mix of exhaustion and resilience. She called the senator's office 7 times. 7 times, no one called back. She traveled here from Oakland on a borrowed bus ticket just to stand here, to see us, and to be heard. Kennedy's voice trembled slightly, quiet like the pain that Mrs. Ellen and countless others endured. She didn't ask for wealth, didn't ask for privilege, only for a safe home to live with dignity. Things you promised when she voted for you. Schiff kept his head down, his gaze pensive, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Kennedy leaned forward one last time, opening a small black notebook. Its worn pages filled with trembling, handwritten notes, full of heartfelt pleas. This isn't evidence to attack anyone, he said, his voice low and hoarse, as if speaking to himself. These are letters, messages, bitter cries from people who once trusted and were ultimately abandoned. He raised the notebook high, his hands slightly trembling, but his gaze resolute. They trusted you, Senator Schiff. They believed in your promises. But in return, they got only cold silence, makeshift tent cities, and broken promises like early season rain. Schiff finally looked up, his face expressionless, as if every ounce of vitality had been drained from him. A reporter whispered, voice choked, "Say something, sir." But Schiff remained silent, and in that silence there was a wordless message more powerful than any defense or explanation. The room seemed to sink into an endless moment where politics and power suddenly felt small before the weight of truth in human hearts. The audience rose to their feet, applauding with a low but powerful resonance. Kennedy didn't smile. He whispered, they matter. Not me. They do. In decades, Schiff had controlled the narrative, but in a single morning, Kennedy handed it back to the people. The chair noted the time. Senator Kennedy, you've made your point clearly. The hearing is nearing its close. Kennedy nodded, then looked at Schiff one last time. I didn't come to destroy your career, sir. That was your choice. I just turned on the light. Schiff blinked rapidly, then lowered his head. As Kennedy left the room, reporters stood maintaining a respectful silence. In the hallway, Mrs. Ellen Carter grasped his hand, whispering, "Thank you for seeing us." Kennedy, once mocked as a thug in a suit, stepped into history as a bearer of justice through truth, not anger. In a nearby meeting room, young congressional interns watched the live feed. One whispered, "I thought Kennedy was just a loud voice. But today, he was different." Another replied, "He didn't defend himself with pride. He defended the people with pain."